Um, Hello and welcome to a special interview for VIT Today. We have with us Dr. Subramanian Swamy, renowned politician, economist, academic, served as a union minister at the center, currently serving as a member of parliament in Rajya Sabha, the upper house of the Indian parliament. He served as the president of the Janta Party and written best-selling books, widely renowned author. And it's a privilege to have him on the show, one of the most anticipated guests, I must say, for the series this far. So, so my first question to you is based a little bit on students and politicians, the relation between students and politicians, academics and politicians in our country. You've been a wide advocate of having people more knowledgeable in the field of economics, medicine, and professionals in the field of politics. Why do you say that's important, and how do you see the bright minds of today getting attracted to politics as a profession?
Well, first of all, I'm not in favor of student politics at all. I don't even approve of elections in colleges. College is a place where you have a limited time of maybe 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. That's a time when people should be concentrating on learning skills of acquiring knowledge. And what I would like is that politics should be populated by people who are knowledgeable, because this modern society has become extremely complex. It's become very small thanks to the online facilities, and it's become technical. Every day you have, your phone. Even then, you need some minimum knowledge of how to handle a machine, however small it is. So therefore, I think the science of government is now no more what the old days Rajas and Maharajas and the kings and queens used to have. And it's a question of making decisions. It's a macro planning. You want to fight the Chinese. There are so many sectors which have to come together to provide you the backup support. So you can't have an illiterate. Or you can be an illiterate in one subject, but you must have a team which is, represents all the basic requirements in politics. It's like economics to begin with, and then handling of people, which I would call as sociology. And then, of course, in terms of minimal of science, that if somebody said, what is desalination of seawater, you shouldn't blink at the sky. So, stare at the sky, not knowing what to say. So, there's a certain amount of minimum science knowledge, not expertise, but knowledge. This would be the ideal politician, and the Prime Minister need not know everything. But he must run a cabinet form of government, whether it's the American system, which is also a cabinet form of government only. But so India is not only a cabinet form of government, but you have to be elected also. So it's an additional qualification. So therefore, I would say that today we don't have. Modi has completely centralized it. It's more like he runs the government like an orchestra, where he has a band, and then somebody plays the violin, somebody plays the flute, that sort of thing. And that's why he's having problems today. He doesn't know what is going wrong with the economics, because he doesn't have people who can stand up to him and tell him this has to be done, this can't be done. Just don't take orders from the PM and then try and implement, and therefore obedient people are put in as ministers. And and they may not even know the subject. So therefore, I would feel that now India has become a very large country. It's the third largest GDP in the world even today. And of course, I don't know what happens next year after the coronavirus is through with us. But at the moment, we are number 3, and we have a young population, which is one of the largest in the world in terms of percentages. And these people should be equipped, and they come out of VIT or IIT or any of the other ITs. They must be able to modernize the country in terms of thinking, in terms of use of resources, in terms of environment, so many factors. When Mrs. Jayalalitha was Chief Minister, one day she asked me, when I was criticizing her for not providing water, so where do I get it from? The Kannadigas are not giving us any water from the Kaveri. So I said, well, desalinate seawater. And she was stumped. She said, what do you mean? That's salty water. How can I do? I said, though, you can desalinate it. You can remove the salt and make it drinking water. She said, is there any country in the world? I said, yeah, of course, Israel, which invented it. And now it's clandestinely, the Saudi Arabians and the Arabs, they're all, Dubai, of course, now diplomatic relations between Israel and UAE has been established, but they had nothing of the kind. They were all hostile to Israel, but now they're using all that technology. That's why you go to Dubai, you see greenery. It was all sand. So, same thing with thorium. That uranium is going to be exhausted in another 10, 15 years. And then the world is going to move to thorium. And we got 60% of thorium in Tamil Nadu beaches itself. So therefore, knowing all this is become very, very important. And therefore, you must have a broad understanding that only an educated person can learn. He may not be a economist, but if he's learned, he will learn enough principles, but he will delegate authority and get economists who will tell him bluntly what can be done, what can't be done. I'll give you an example. Prime Minister said in 2019, after getting re-elected, that I will double the national income of India from $2.5 trillion to $5 trillion. Now that means a growth rate of 14.4% per year. And when I pointed this out, people were taken aback. It's that much? I said, yes, there's a simple calculation by which you can find out. Now, nobody who is familiar with the modicum of mathematics would have made that mistake. Or doubling of agricultural income in 4 years, that's 18% per year. So when we are not even getting 3% per year before the corona, where is the question of going to 14.4%? So these are the places where you may be popular on caste lines, religious lines, whatever lines. But ultimately, for running the country, it's a multi-dimensional society. And therefore, we need educated people. Therefore, politicians should be selected from those who got a basic grounding in some field, in which field they are an expert. And therefore, having this mental discipline, they can pick up concepts of other fields also while sitting in the cabinet.
Right, sir. So before we delve a little deeper into the economics of it, you rightly pointed out, before that I have a short follow-up on something you stated, which is basically the centralized system in which Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister, functions. Could you perhaps elaborate a little bit more on that, considering that we still have a working cabinet, we have a working parliament, yet why do you think the Prime Minister functions in a centralized manner? Secondly,
go on. Yeah, go on.
right.
Yeah,
Secondly, you pointed out something incredibly interesting, which is the United States of America. They work in a presidential form of governance, right? Their form of functioning is a bit different from what we do in what we have in India here. Could you perhaps give us a little bit on a little bit more?
I'll start with that.
Right, sir.
The chief executive is selected by direct election. So that's why it is called a presidential system. But then he appoints ministers, they are called secretaries. And each of them is a personality. Some of the Harvard professors have been Secretary of Treasury. For instance, Professor Summers, Henry Kissinger, these are all professors. So therefore, there's a cabinet meeting and there's discussion, there's a disagreements, there are agreements, then a consensus is searched for, and then a decision is taken. The president can't say, no, yes, there are, in terms of administrative, the president can sign and get it. But that's not how it functions. It functions according to a constitution, a cabinet. And we have some of the things which are independent. For instance, the Federal Reserve Board, this is totally independent, not like our rubber stamp Reserve Bank. So therefore, I think, please don't, go by terminology. It's not a presidential form of a government. It's a presidential form of election. It is, but the government is a cabinet government.
Right, sir. My second follow-up was a little bit based on the national context, where you pointed out the functioning in which the which the prime minister is functioning is a little unorthodox, in the sense that he has a team of people, but he's working in a more centralized manner. How is that detrimental to progress in the country, and why should that be changed, and how can it be changed?
If the ministers are so dependent that they have to rely on the prime minister to give clearances, then it becomes a centralized system. And if the prime minister secretariat can overrule a minister, supposing a minister decides something, and the prime minister secretariat, the prime minister or PMO as it's called, they say no, this file can't be cleared because we have discussed it with the prime minister and we are sending you an amendment. And then that starts going to even ordinary things like appointments and so on. So the autonomy of the minister must be for his field, and for everything he should not get an approval of the prime minister. And as a consequence, people with true independent thinking based on their own level of education, they find it very hard to work with the prime minister because unless I was a minister in Mr. Chandrasekhar's government, I had a minister rank position in Narasimha Rao's government, and we had disagreements, but ultimately my vote was taken in the cabinet and the policy was decided. That's fair. So, but where it happens that the minister has to reverse it because the prime minister said so, or the PMO has conveyed the prime minister's view, and that becomes a centralized system. And how can the prime minister know? That's why he makes these mistakes, like doubling of GDP in 5 years, or doubling of agricultural product in output in 4 years. How would you make such a bloomer of a mistake? Because if the PMO says if PMO phones up the finance minister and says, listen, the prime minister wants to double the GDP, is that okay with you? She'll say yes, of course it's okay with me. She will not say no, that can't be done. It is 18.8%. Well, maybe she wouldn't be finance minister the next day.
Right, sir. So now moving a bit more into the economy. So yesterday the GDP numbers of the quarter came and everyone was quite shocked.
Everyone was shocked. I was not. I've been writing in Hindu newspaper op-eds saying this is going to happen. How many articles I've written? Just go to Google and type Swamy op-eds in Hindu. You'll get it all from the 1950 to 2015 onwards. So don't say
right,
every word.
Right, sir. So obviously that's something that's kind of unprecedented, with it going to minus 23.9%.
So it was going down. Do you know that the growth rate has been going down year after year?
Yeah.
And even before Corona came, the growth rate had dropped to the lowest since 1947. From 1947 to 1990, our average rate of growth was 3.5% per year. And now it's 3%. I mean, 3% when the last fourth quarter of the last year was over, last financial year was over. This year it is going to be minus 23%. Okay, but the decline has been going on steadily for the last 5 years, and now the corona has taken you in a dive. That's all. And it's not
Sir,
that it
so
wasn't
although
brought out.
the
I brought it out. I wrote letters to him. I have, written articles about it, but everybody is too scared.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So although the government had I mean, obviously not very actively, but had tried to make some changes here or there in the labor laws, or try
What
to
do you
come
mean
up
by
with
that?
incentives.
Listen, let me tell you one thing, because you don't know
Yes, sir.
economics. You're not an economic student, right? Are you an economic
No, sir.
student? All right.
No,
So
no, I'm not.
I forgive you for that question. Economics is two branches. One is called macroeconomics, and the other is called microeconomics. All right. Now, microeconomics deals with, I go to a shop and the price is too high, I won't buy. If the price is low, I'll buy a lot. So this is called demand and supply economics. But when it comes to macroeconomics, that guy from America called Rajan was a Reserve Bank governor. All of you were praising him, great, because he spoke good English or something. But he went on raising interest rates. And when I raised this issue, I was told that Mr. Raghuram Rajan says that only by raising interest rates I can control inflation. Because if you raise the interest rate, the money supply contracts, and the money supply contracts, then the prices will come down. But I said at the same time, when you raise interest rates, small and medium industries, which depend on loans from banks, their cost of capital will go up. They will fold up. And then what will happen? There will be a supply shortage, and inflation will anyway take place. That's why during Mr. Raghuram Rajan's, after 1 or 2 years, the prices started going up. In America, the Great Depression took place because when there was some sizable unemployment, the president of the United States called all the economists, and he said that my elections are coming. I want the unemployment to go down. What should I do? So the then economists, those days economists gave them him a demand and supply lecture, saying that the price of the wages by collective bargaining of trade unions have gone too high. So people are not employing that much. They're using capital substitution. So what you need to do is go and persuade the trade unions that till the elections are over, at least allow us to reduce the wage rate by 10%, so that labor becomes cheap and the more employment takes place. Makes common sense to you, I'm sure. But what happened?
Yeah.
When you lowered the wages, the purchasing power of workers went down. So they stopped going to markets to buy. Or they curtailed their purchases. So the demand went down, and therefore there was a further unemployment because factories started closing down. They were not, the products were not being sold. So therefore, in macroeconomics, something you do here has an effect there. Just like raising interest rates has an effect on the cost of capital. So therefore, you have to know macroeconomics before you can know how to make policy for the government. And that I regret to say you can't learn by common sense. Common sense tells you if the prices go up, demand will come down. And if prices come down, the supply, the demand for supply will increase. I mean, you can have. So this is the issue today. Also, all the measures that have been taken against coronavirus have been all targeted for supply, telling reducing corporate tax and so on. What you have to do is put money in the hands of the government, of the people, so that they go and buy. Because today there's a supply gut. What we have a demand shortage. So you must focus on demand shortage. That has not been done so far. And how do you today focus on demand shortage? Put money into people's hands. You know that how many millions and millions of people in America today have got directly into their bank account checks sent by the US government. If you have any friends, ask them. If they have a salary trust, they would have definitely confirm it to you. That is the way to manage the economy. Today, the economy can turn around if you strengthen the demand forces, because there is an excess supply. Cars are lying in showrooms, galore. You go to any automobile store, you will see cars are there. Nobody's buying cars. So you want them to buy, put money into people's hands. Today, people are insecure, so they are, what they used to spend, even that they are cutting down and saving. So this is the general equilibrium of an economy comes only by training. It can't be learned by common sense.
Right, sir. So, just based on the limited knowledge I have, I'll ask you another question on the economics of the current status quo. So, we spoke to CEA Subramanian, the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, a few days back. And even a few days back, he was extremely optimistic as to saying that no, we are over assessing the negatives. It's not as bad as people are saying. That's basically his perspective. And his second point was, let's wait for the vaccine to come out. It's only then when we can relax the spending limits. When I asked him about the demand side question, which you rightly addressed right now. So what is your comment on this attitude and the current governance by the CEA?
See, I know him. He's a bright young professor of the Indian School of Business. I met him. He's come to my house too. The issue is, how much freedom does he have to speak? He may say, I speak frankly with you, but he won't remain one day. Supposing he says the policies followed so far by the government of India has been wrong. We have to change our focus from supply to, because all what Modi said is everything, I'll give you this, I'll give you this, I'll put your cylinders in your house. It's all supply. But the real issue is today demand, and he's not addressing it. This, some $21 trillion rupees or some package they produce, how much of it is for demand? Only 1.5 trillion. Now, what's the others for? Giving subsidies to industry, but the industry is not hasn't the problem. There are no buyers. Okay, so what he says, as far as his brightness, his knowledge and all, I have no problem. But he's too timid to go and stand up to the PM and saying, no, this policy is wrong.
Yes, sir. So because we've been talking about the importance of educated people, specifically like we saw in economics right now, in politics, one of the main things that that is talked about within colleges, etc. right now is that everyone wants to go abroad and wants to pursue their masters in respective fields. So firstly, do you think that brain drain is a legitimate problem India is facing, and what are the best ways we can employ to stop this from happening?
Well, if they come back, will you look after him? Will you give him a decent job? Will you behave well with him? You know what happened to me? I was a Harvard professor. I got a PhD, broke all records in getting in the shortest possible time. I was a joint author with Paul Samuelson, who was the Einstein of economics. I was my thesis advisor, Simon Kuznets, another Nobel laureate. I taught at Harvard, and I continue to teach afterwards also. But on a semester basis, I used to go for one semester in the summer. What did they do when I came here? They wrote me a letter inviting me to come and teach at the Delhi School of Economics. When I arrived there, they said, no, we don't like your ideology. We can't give you this. I said, but you wrote me a letter. He said, letter? What does letter mean? I then became professor at IIT. And I wrote a book called saying that Indian economic growth can never rise above 3.5% per year unless you become market oriented. And Mrs. Gandhi in Parliament took my book and read out and said, such a person is in the IIT, which is funded by the government. How can we tolerate it? Next day I was dismissed. Of course, I won the court case, but after 21 years. So I had a choice, go back. Harvard was telling me, why you gone back? Come back. We want you. We never wanted you to leave in the first place. But I said, no, I'll stay in India because I like India. I'm an Indian. I'm more comfortable in India than I can be there. I have to drive my own car. I have to do my own laundry. I have to do. My wife has to stay at home in the kitchen and cook food. Everything has to be done. Cleaning bathrooms, I have to clean myself. So here I have plenty of time to do other things because I can afford servants to do this. So I'm not saying this is a permanent situation. I think as the economy improves, it's going to become more and more difficult to get servants. And the servants educate their children, and then of course it become even more difficult. So therefore, why you talk about brain drain? What you want people to do is come back, then make them feel at home. There's so much jealousy in our society. The moment a bright guy comes, what was the problem with me? With Amartya Sen, who may have got, by whatever influence, the Nobel Prize, but not for any technical economics, but for on famine in Bengal. I mean, that's a ridiculous thing where he exonerated the British. And the British were not responsible for famine. It is Bengalis who ate too much rice. That was the responsibility. And he got a Nobel Prize for that. But anyway, what did he do? As soon as I came back, they all felt that, because of my background of working with Paul Samuelson and Simon Kuznets, I'd overshadow them. And that's there in every field. Even in politics, the same problem is there. If I become a minister, I won't listen to anybody. So you have to have a prime minister who feels confident that even if he doesn't listen to me, but at least we are together. That confidence is not there. Is there in your institute? I don't know. I don't know whether your professors teach your junior professors. They're senior professors like Simon Kuznets and Paul Samuelson, like fathers. They, caught you by the hand and led you through the difficult parts of research, and then they promoted you. Here, there was nobody promoting. If I've heard so many complaints of people who say that I did this research and my teacher said it has to be a joint paper. She said, but I've done all the work. Okay, well then in that case you won't be here. They will sack you. And anyway, the boss of the institute will publish the paper in his own name. And what can they do? Fight. I fought. Yes, I made life miserable for IIT. I got my professorship back and came back, spent one day and then dismissed. Resigned, saying I don't want to be in IIT. Give me back my back salary of 22 years at 8% interest. And they had to. I made more money by being sacked than if I had been in IIT and got a pension.
So on that note, let's transition a bit into global geopolitics. Firstly, I wanted to get your take on how important this US election is going to be from India's perspective. We finally have a little more clarity on Joe Biden and his running mate, Kamala Harris. We also know the opposition, Mr. Trump. How is this going to play out by the end of the year, and how do you see this affecting global geopolitics, especially in the context of India?
Well, we neither can underestimate if a change takes place and Biden comes. We can neither underestimate nor overestimate. It may sound like a platitude, but let me explain. First of all Americans, without exceptions, for them, America comes first. So American national interests will matter whoever comes to power. But the way they go about it is what matters. If Biden comes to power and becomes president, that daily you will have some delegation coming to India to examine the plight of minorities and so on and so forth. And they will make a big issue of it. If it weren't for me, I think, for example, this issue in Sri Lanka, where the LTT was treated as demigods, we would have completely alienated Sri Lanka. And today, Sri Lanka is one of the few countries in our neighborhood which is standing up and saying India first. So people they have to rely on the media for information. Media can be managed. Today, already, forces which are anti-Indian want to paint India as a country which has become retrograde, where Muslims are getting killed daily. There's concentration camps, there's gas chambers. All this is being propagated in the United States. And some of the official bodies like the Religious Freedom Body and so on, they are passing resolutions. There was a time when they cancelled the visa facility for Narendra Modi. So therefore, in India, the so-called they call themselves secular. I still don't know what secular means, because any Hindu is 100% secular. He regards all religions lead to God. Just because you want a Hindu society to reform, you don't become communal. So this old strategy, divide the Hindus into North Indians, South Indians, Bengalis, Madrasis, into Brahmins, scheduled caste, all these divisions are only for enabling the minorities to play a bigger role in elections than they can if the Hindus were to be united, because Hindus are 82% of the population. So all that will be affected. The forces of division of our society will be strengthened in America, and they will misinterpret everything. I say the CAA, what a lot of misinterpretation. I don't know what in the Vellore Institute of Technology you people have understood it, but these were people who came running away after partition. And Gandhi himself, Mahatma Gandhi, in his prayer meeting about 1 month before his assassination, said this: I have been mistaken in thinking that Hindus living in Pakistan will not be driven out or persecuted. But now these people who are coming back, we must give them citizenship, and as fast as possible. And for years they were living in tents. Some died and their children living in tents, no schooling. Now later on, when we came to power, it was all Aadhaar card and this card and that card, which you can't get unless you are a citizen. And so we decided that these people, which are Hindus, Christians, Buddhists, Jains, and Parsis. Now these are not all Hindus. The Parsis are not Hindus, and Christians are not Hindus. In a broad sense, you can say the Sikhs and Jains and Buddhists, they came out of Hinduism, so you can connect them with Hindus. But anyway, these categories, if they have been in India for at least 5 years before December 31st, 2014, then they will get citizenship, and that the Citizenship Act, which requires 11 years to be here, will be waived in this to make it only 5 years. Now, what is the anti-Muslim in it? Because there's no Muslim in the list. How can Muslims come on religious persecution from Pakistan or Bangladesh or Afghanistan? Why are you doing it only for these countries? Because this is an outcome of the partition. It's an unfinished business of the partition. So therefore, we have done. Any Muslim wants to come from Pakistan to India to become an Indian citizen, there is the Citizenship Act, only that he'll have to wait 11 years instead of 70 years. These people have waited 70 years. And we have only said now if you apply, you'll run into this problem of 11 years. We're cutting it down to 5, provided you have lived already 5 years. So this kind of propaganda, 370 under the constitution is a temporary constitution, should be removed. An assurance is given by Sardar Patel to the Constituent Assembly, and Ambedkar, of course, refused to pilot Article 370, saying it's an anti-national amendment. I will not pilot it. So Gopala Swamy Iyengar had to pilot the bill. So the issue was that they said this is temporary, because Nehru's gone to the UN, it will be all over in a few months, and then we will remove it. But we didn't remove it. And so we removed it, because we said that you can't have two constitutions in one country. You can't have two types of citizenship in one country. It was a temporary provision. If you read the constitution, the headline of that section is temporary provision with regard to the state of Jammu and Kashmir.
It was a great and warm discussion we had today, and thank you so much for giving us time this morning. I hope we can do this sometime soon, perhaps a little later once things get better and we have a little more to discuss on the economy and politics in our country. So with that,
Happy to. He's been asking me many times to come. So he was also a minister, and then he decided he'll become an academician. It's a reverse. Reverse. So I'll be happy to come. I've come to VIT before, but a long time ago. And one question I can ask you that you had a course for Chinese language. Is it still continuing, or you have closed it all down?
Yeah, sir. So it's still continuing. I think it is.
Continuing. Language is never. There's no such thing as enmity and friendship in question of language. Language is language. It's a beautiful language. I learned it at Harvard, and so I think all should learn it. They learn Hindi. Oh, how many people there? A huge percentage of our student population knows Hindi there. So and Sanskrit too. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay. On that note, then, thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a great day. And